This is Garis, masculist, MGTOW flyers. That is 2 3-page essays on the themes of masculism and MGTOW. Written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 510. Entitled, Men Get Angry. Description. This flyer pushes men to get angry by absorbing masculist ideas, so that they see that women oppress men far worse, and become angry at the monoconscious ignorance and public misandry of feminists. By becoming biconscious, masculists are able to crush the hypocritical genocide of the monoconscious feminists, targeting their monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, converting them into biconscious masculists, who then become disgusted at their former monoconscious feminist girlfriends and dump them. The flyer itself. Men Get Angry by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Once a man becomes familiar with masculist arguments and learns that women oppress men far worse than vice versa, given that women's gender crimes against men often last decades, then the monoconscious anger of the feminists against men, who know nothing about masculism by definition, becomes insufferable and makes biconscious masculists angry, making them feel it's time to take off the gloves and lay down the gauntlet, telling these feminazi bitches, quote, "Learn some masculism, you monoconscious shits, or we masculists will take away your male feminist boyfriends by converting them to be biconscious. So if you remain monoconscious feminazi bigots, they will become disgusted with you and dump you." End quote. Young masculists on campus, now that the COVID scare is mostly over, hopefully, need to really spread masculist arguments to their friends and acquaintances, telling them how women oppress men, and far worse, so that men are given the intellectual arms to fight the growing feminazi hypocritical belief that gender oppression is a one-way street, which is an idea that seems stupid and ignorant to biconscious masculists, who have a basis for comparison with feminism that the monoconscious feminists don't have. The monoconscious feminist anger at men is seen by masculists as hypocritical, since masculists see women as committing far greater gender crimes against men than vice versa. Monoconscious feminists only feel that they have the right to be angry at men because of their monoconsciousness, their ignorance of masculist ideas, since a biconscious feminist usually has her monoconscious anger at men for the ways that men oppress women cancelled by her new biconscious knowledge, her new knowledge of masculist ideas on how women oppress men, and worse than vice versa. So her feminist anger is countered by her female masculist anger at women for the ways that women oppress men. She thus loses her monoconscious feminazi bitchiness, and that is something that the masculists want very much in women and expect it in them. Millions of feminists argue that they expect the men in their lives to be male feminists, purely on humanitarian grounds, taking an attitude that a reasonable man need only be exposed to the arguments of the feminists for equal rights with men to agree with them and become male feminists. There are millions of male feminists in the above sense. Well, masculists use the same logic, expecting a reasonable woman to become a female masculist by being exposed to the arguments of the masculists for equal rights with women to agree with the masculists. However, this is not yet the case, partly because masculist ideas are too new for nearly all women, and partly because the masculists have not yet really hit the evangelical trail, getting out there and preaching hard the masculist worldview, telling women and other men, monoconscious men, how women oppress men, by spelling out to them masculist ideas. For example, how fluffy feminists are hypocrites and genociders in the hated divorce courts that they control, financially massacring one father in 4 destroying his life. Tell women that they have to get off their fat parasitic asses and fib up, or be left rotting on the shelf, spat at by masculists for being decades-long man-slaving vermin to be wiped out by the masculists. Tell women that they have a life expectancy of 85 years, thanks to men, and a career window of half a century, so have a powerful moral obligation to get off their fat parasitic asses and fib up, or be severely punished by men by not getting one. Tell women that they commit a string of gender crimes against men that last decades. For example, paternity fraud, pill lying. Tell them they have the MARA, maternity rejection right, but men don't have the PARA, paternity rejection right. And tell them that this is the most blatant form of sexual discrimination that exists, and that it's not against women, but against men. Tell them that as a masculist, you're fed up with the public misandry of feminazi bitches who harp on how men are pigs, men are rapists, men are toxic, etc. So harangue these misandrous, monoconscious feminazi cunts with masculist rhetoric, telling them how genetically inferior women are than men, with women's 10% smaller brains, their 10 billion fewer neurons, 10% less neural processing capacity. So no wonder women don't build anything, invent anything, create anything, always having been parasites of men who couldn't hunt, couldn't fight, couldn't plough, so were never respected as a sex by men, who only tolerated women because of women's two traditional monopolies of vagina and womb. But women will lose even these soon, since the sex bots are coming out now with their luscious curves, film star faces, creamy, grippy vaginas, and increasingly equipped with AI, that's artificial intelligence, based conversational abilities. Tell them that 40% of women are now obese and 30% fat. So for slim men, 2/3 of women have made themselves unfuckable. So women are losing the only real attraction that women have for men, that is, their vaginas. So not surprisingly, millions of men are now wiping their hands at women, choosing to live the MGTOW lifestyle, reacting to the awful toxicity of the divorce courts by rejecting marriage, rejecting paternity, and spending their money on themselves. Tell them that Jap scientists have already grown a goat in an art womb, that's artificial womb, so human babies are not far off. Tell them when men can grow their own kids and prefer to sex their bots, then if women aren't really, in capital letters, nice to men, then women will utterly rot on the shelf. Tell them that the masculists want GECs, that's GECs, that's gender equality committees, in the parliaments that consist half of female feminists and half of male masculists, so that the gender issues of both sexes are treated equally in the parliaments, so that new gender laws are passed that are men fair. For example, the PARA, that will give men the same right that women have to reject an unwanted pregnancy, to counter the awful gender crime that women commit against men of pill lying. And the OPTAB, OPTAB, obligatory paternity testing at birth for all births, to counter the awful gender crime that women commit against men by forcing a man to pay for a kid for decades that is not even his. Get really nasty, vindictive, vicious, angry, hateful at these monoconscious feminazi bigots, that's MFBs, by haranguing them with masculist ideas, masculist rhetoric, making them conscious that their days of gender political monopoly that they have had for the past 6 decades are now well and truly over. Make them very aware that men have changed, that men now have their own gender political ism that causes men to see the world differently, that men are now having their own consciousness raised, becoming aware how women oppress men, and far worse. Tell these women that masculism is essentially a rebellion by men against being man's slaves to women, working for women for decades of their lives. Ram home to these monoconscious, misandrist shits that for masculists, fluffydom is manslavery, and manslavery is slavery, and hence hated and a war issue. Tell them that masculists see manslavery as a far bigger problem than was Negro slavery, since there are several billion man-slaves in the world today who need to be liberated by masculist ideas. Negro slavery was the root cause of the US Civil War. The masculists are at war against fluffy manslavers and against fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders. Tell these fluffy feminist hypocrite genociders who have made divorce so toxic for men that they are indirectly wiping out whole populations. So in many countries now, 2/3 of young men, and growing, refuse to marry and reject paternity, since they utterly refuse to face a 1 chance in 4 of being financially crucified and have his life ruined at the hands of the hated fluffy feminist hypocrite controlled divorce courts. So these millions of MGTOWing men are crashing the birth rate, but are merely reacting to the toxicity of the divorce courts. So the root cause of the now rapid population decline are the hated fluffy feminist hypocrites, who are seen by the masculists as genociders, since these fluffy feminists are causing the decline. Tell these monoconscious feminazis that if they continue the way they are going, then there will be a sex war, and they will end up with a bullet between their eyes, since no culture that destroys the lives of 1/4 of its fathers can remain intact. Men will explode, pick up arms, and kill these monoconscious, misandrist, feminazi genociders, who are the most hated category of women by the masculists because of their genocide, wiping out whole populations, so obviously have to be stopped. Tell these feminazi cunts that their misandry is profoundly hypocritical, since women's oppression of men is far worse. So masculists feel strongly motivated to crush these monoconscious feminazis whenever we come across them. Soon, there will be a dozen very angry, hateful masculists in a room to gender politically harangue monoconscious feminists, telling them if they don't become biconscious faster than their currently monoconscious boyfriends, then they will lose them. Since the masculists are deliberately targeting these monoconscious boyfriends to convert them to becoming biconscious as a political weapon against the hateful monoconscious bigotry of their feminist girlfriends, scaring these women shitless that if they don't quickly get off their fat parasitic asses and become biconscious and fib up, then they will soon be dumped by their former monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, who are now biconscious and see their monoconscious feminist girlfriends as bigots and dump them in disgust. So guys, learn masculist ideas, become intellectually armed with very powerful masculist ideas and rhetoric, so that you can go out into the world and sow the masculist seed. Convert a dozen or so of your friends to the masculist worldview and attack the monoconscious bigotry of the monoconscious feminazis in your social circle, putting the fear of God into them that if they don't soon become biconscious, that is faster than their monoconscious male feminist boyfriends, then they will face a serious risk of being dumped and spat at by their freshly minted biconscious ex-boyfriends, who are disgusted at the monoconscious ignorance and bigotry of their former monoconscious feminist girlfriends. So guys, get angry, get political, get active, get society changed, get the gender laws men feared, create the GECs, that's GECs, Gender Equality Committees, bring in the PARA, that's paternity rejection right, the OPTAB, that's obligatory paternity testing at birth. Spit at and reject fluffy manslaving parasites. Push for the fipping of women, for the creation of a FIP society. Spit at monoconscious, fluffy feminist, hypocrite genociders. Go to ideological war with them and crush them with your superior male intelligence and greater superior verbal aggression, with your 10 times higher testosterone levels in your blood. Be conscious that when men become collectively angry at women, then God help women. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Author of the book Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Man-Slaves to Women, an e-textbook of 510 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Freely downloadable in Microsoft Word format from my website.